You're watching In the Office. My name is Bray. Let's do some quote learning. Today for episode number 37, I want to cover this idea about how the STEM fields need history. What are the STEM fields? We have science, technology, engineering, and math. This was kind of put forth by the Bush administration in about 2001. And when I was coming up through grade school, we were the targeted generation with STEM. And we would go into these auditoriums and they would give us these presentations about how we ought to be looking to go into STEM fields, that there will be job expansion in these areas, and that the growth potential, not just for the jobs but for your pocketbook, were there. And they would also use the negative side of advertising, telling us that there were a lot of fields that were dying off and we need not get into them. Even though they were very ambiguous on that end, it created this cloud of concern that maybe this is really the only area that we ought to pursue. And I love all of these fields. I have a very healthy respect for science, technology, engineering, and math, so much so that I want them to be as strong as they can possibly be. I don't need them to be isolated from the one field that brings accountability to all of them, and that is history. If we do not have history to bring accountability to science, technology, engineering, and math, then what will happen is these things will get co-opted for political purposes and thus hurt us. And quickly, I'm going to run through a few reasons and show you a few areas how these have hurt us. Science has more or less become a religion for a lot of people. It's something that cannot be questioned. So much so that the highest paid government official in our country, Dr. Anthony Fauci, said on a cable TV show that when you question the science, you are questioning Dr. Anthony Fauci in the third person. So there's a lot of ego behind science right now. There's a lot of money that's behind it as well. With that being said, we need history to teach us about the abuses of science in the past and the areas and where the most amount of advancement were, so that we can put our resources to best use. If there's some very good studies and some very fruitful studies that happen in one area, let's make sure that we're either replicating that concept or funding that concept. Moreover, some over here that are not doing us any good. And you can actually look up the dog studies that have been shown to have come out recently that Dr. Fauci made sure to fund. Some very, very not good things are happening in that arena. So with science, if you have history to be added to the equation, then you're going to be able to see where science went wrong. Also, if you don't have the history of the last 9 to 12 months, you won't understand how the next one is connected. Technology. Technology has been used to be weaponized against people for speaking out against bad science. If you don't know that science can be questioned everywhere and in every public venue, then there's some areas of it that will just blossom into greater depravity and greater deception. Technology, our social media apparatus, has made it such that it's very difficult to question vaccines. It's very difficult to question mandates. It's very difficult to question the way that these injections came about, how they were manufactured, how that they were made, how that they were tested, how they're being tested, the results of those tests. All of that technology apparatus makes it difficult for us to get the accurate information about science, and if they want to hide some of it, they're being given coverage for hiding some of that, like the myocarditis, the enlarging of the heart stuff that we've heard about. So much of that was suppressed early on because of the technology connectivity to the science. They work in tandem. Again, that's why history is needed to bring accountability. Engineering sort of sits in its own little area, but we'll still connect it. But when we can't agree that 2 + 2 = 4, then when we're building plane engines and we're building military vehicles and we're building cyber security for our country, if we can't all agree that 2 + 2 is 4, then we're going to have some very dangerous equipment. And history teaches us that if we get haughty and if we start taking our eyes off of the main things, when Rome took their eyes off of being these people of conquest, these conquistadors. When they took their eyes off of that, then they become drunkards and sluggards, and really they lost their empire in just a matter of time. But I see engineering mostly used to talk about gender pay gap disparities, when the truth of the matter is that women tend to go into fields that they can be more empathetic and have an emotional connection with, and that's just the averages. So when you have engineering as the number one field trotted out where there is a gender pay gap, you can understand how this kind of comes into the equation. Instead of that, we should have history to see that all of these women entering into that field is a good thing if they want to. If they desire to be in that area, that is a good thing, and they've been able to be going into that field for decades now without restriction. And if that's something that makes them happy, that's a good thing. History teaches us that the positive is that women have been able to get in and to explore and excel in this field if they want to. Not that there's a pay gap. There's 10 reasons why a gender pay gap theory is a bunch of hogwash, and maybe that's another podcast. Down to math, the final. If you do not understand math, word problems, which is where most of life really happens, are in the word problems of life. When you did them in the 6th grade, you probably hated them. Johnny had 10 apples and he sold 4 apples for $3 a piece. How much money does Johnny have after he pays off his debts of $15 to the supplier that gave him the apples? And your brain's like, oh, I don't know how to handle that. Well, the truth is, if you can't handle word problems, then you're going to end up being buffooned most of your adult life. I forget the guy who said the quote, but he said something to the effect that there are lies, darn lies, and statistics, meaning that the numbers really matter. Many lies are told in the numbers, right? How tall are you? Well, I'm this tall. How much do you weigh? Well, I weigh this much. So how much did you buy? I bought this much. How much did that cost? It only cost this much. Numbers matter so much in life. And if science doesn't have the accountability of history, and technology doesn't have the accountability of history, and engineering and math, then we're going to find ourselves believing the science, being duped by the technology, being controlled by the engineering, and being lied to about the math. Now, I, for one, don't want that to happen to me or anybody that I care about. And that's why I tell people, history will bring accountability to those subjects, because you can look at where they got it right and where they got it wrong, and then you can make a decision about whether or not you put more stock in these areas of study where they got it right. Maybe it's a similar study, or some more skepticism in an area where maybe they missed the mark many times before. The STEM fields are not the only fields that are out there for people to go into. There are many other fields that you can explore that are fruitful and are necessary. And then there's a lot of overlap in fields of STEM with other fields. Like if you want to be an artist, well, you still got to be able to count well, and you still got to be able to use technology to promote yourself and get yourself out there. And that's just the way that these fields intertwine with one another. But when we say that history is more or less irrelevant, then what we do to it is we minimize it, we toss it in the corner, keeping it over there because we don't want it to shed light on what it is that we're doing. Can the STEM fields bring a lot of advancements? They have, and they are. But if we don't want to welcome history to the table, then we're not going to be as productive and as forward learning and growing as we want to as quickly, because who would have thought the debate of 2 + 2 = 4 would come back up? And who would have thought the gender debate about this wage gap theory would be just something that obsesses people when there's all kinds of reasons why it's not? Who would have thought that people would still be allowing themselves to be lied to through statistics and simple math problems? Well, history knew that, because nothing's new under the sun. And there are people like myself that at times have wanted to be lied to. When a person buys a lottery ticket, they want to be lied to. They want to believe for a minute that their chances are so great, that they have a chance. I mean, it's almost like in Dumb and Dumber, so you're saying there's a chance. Yes, I'm saying there's a chance. Buy my lottery ticket. I'm saying there's a chance. Buy my medical device. I'm saying there's a chance. Buy this thing that I've built. I'm saying that there's a chance. Use this technology. Use this dating app, and you'll get the date. Yeah, I'm saying that there's a chance. Let's not be had one pulled over on us because we don't see that history is the accountability factor and field of study that must come back into play if we are going to go forward in wisdom. You be thinking on these things, and we'll see you next time.